My apologies. I had to turn my camera around. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not seeing myself. I'm silly, y'all. Don't mind me. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Mommy Chats. My name is Cecile Edwards, and I am the CEO and creative director of Mommy Evolve. And I am bringing you our Mommy Chat every Thursday at 8 p.m. to just discuss some things that is on our minds and how we can integrate them into our daily lives and daily practice. So today, as I told you earlier, I was going to discuss a book that I had been reading, and I have got myself back in the habit of reading because I love to read, I love to research. And so probably once a month, I will present the book that I have completed and talk about how it relates to intergenerational healing, self-care, postpartum care and work, child rearing, parenting, and energy, which are all things that I discuss on a regular basis. And so today, I really wanted to get into the conversation about this book right here. Let's show it to you. So don't mind the fact that it has a big old sticker on it. The title, the author is Dr. Joy DeGruy's or DeGruy. Please forgive me if I don't say it correctly. But she is the author. And she is a well-known author and speaker on the issue of race and post-traumatic slavery syndrome. And it talks about the legacy of slavery and how it has affected the people of African descent in this country, and how we have essentially adapted, how this country has adapted to the presence of African people in this country, and how African people have adapted to, but more importantly, how African people have adapted to the presence of having been enslaved in many different ways in this country. And so you're probably like, well, what does this have to do with? Well, it has to do with intergenerational healing, intergenerational understanding, because in the beginning of the book, she does an excellent job of really setting the stage and really talking about the various value systems. And she connects the value systems that groups in Africa have to the value systems that we continue to perpetuate that were in some way destroyed through the process of being enslaved. And so one of the things that I really love that she said was that she talked about the importance of relationship. And so I'm building up my point here. She talked about the importance of relationship and how, that is how we function. We function in a unit as a relationship. We earn and are concerned with the idea of respect in our communities, and that this is a very central force. And she gives some very specific examples of how, for example, people of other persuasions may be able to, come to work and work with each other even though they don't like each other. Whereas people of African descent may not be able to do that because the relationship and the respect garnered through the relationship is very central to them. And she says something very profound on page 43. She says, when culture becomes overly concerned with their relationship to the material world, even people can become objectified, right? And so this to me relates to not only the fact that slavery could exist, but it also relates to me to the importance of keeping the closeness of relationships intact and ensuring that we understand the rules of engagement when it comes to people and relationships. But it also made me think about the relationship between mother and child and how that can become strained because mom is overworking, disconnected from herself, and how that may affect the perception that the child has of mommy and what mommy means, or what mommy is able to do, and what her affection or lack of affection or just imbalance in any way affects the balance within the child and their ability to build relationships. So we've heard before that, when a woman has a poor relationship with her mother, it may be difficult for her to have a good relationship with other women when she grows up and when she gets older. Okay, and I can tell you from personal experience and personal observation that certainly can be the case. So it can be either an over, reliance on female relationships, or it can be a non-reliance on female relationships that rift in relationship with mother can create, right? But we have to go within ourselves and determine whether or not that is the reality. I think that this also points to something that I talked to Neelam Nanwani today when I did a podcast interview, and you can find that on my podcast, that you can find on my website, www.mommyevolve.com, or you can go to anchor.fm/Mommy Matters to find the most recent episode, which is called Empowered Mama, Mother as Leader. And we talk very much about the way that, whatever goes on in the womb, from the womb, the perceptions of the child is formed. Right. And so if there's trauma in the mom, which there's trauma in everybody has trauma in some kind of way. If there's traumas, and of course we come to earth with our souls, traumas and needs that need to be met. We, may experience some traumas through childbirth, those kinds of things. And, we just have those for the rest of our lives. And there's, in some societies and cultures, there's no mitigation of, what may have happened and how to keep the child as close to themselves, within themselves as possible, without having to deal with all that outside trauma. And so these are all things that we need to consider as parents, thinking about the condition of you when you're pregnant, the condition of you before you get pregnant, and the circumstances around you when you get pregnant, the circumstances after you have a baby, whether or not you're stressed or, those kinds of things. Because all of those subtle things within your environment can affect the functioning of the child. Just point blank, period, bottom line. And there's scientific evidence for that. If you're a sciencey person and you don't, understand the power of energy and the power of, when something, you can push things down all you want. You can push things down all you want. But the truth of the matter is that energy it just transforms into whatever it is that it transforms into. And when you're a woman who is taking care of a child, or you're pregnant with a child, things that you're not aware of transmutes and transforms itself within your child. And so, I think that this book, and I'm talking about, again, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. And I think that this book just really is a phenomenal book. And it's crazy because I had this book on my shelf for too long. Okay. Don't tell nobody. And just understanding the importance of the mother-child relationship, understanding the importance of the relationship of the mother to herself, and how that affects ultimately the relationship that the child has to the community, and to the world, because what we show them, what we teach them, how we interact. So I can remember, for example, I always heard the terminology, I don't like being around people. I like to keep a small circle, all of those things are things that I heard. And so I grew up for a long time with this idea and this notion that I could be separate from people, and that I could exist alone and be a loner, and that I would be fine. And it wasn't until maybe, 10 years ago that I came to realize that it just simply doesn't work. And that was just part of something that I had heard. And so that I had experienced. And it's like, it really doesn't do you any good to have a small circle, especially since you're a multifaceted person. And when you're talking about a small circle, okay, people that you tell your secrets to, perhaps, maybe, but vulnerability is very powerful, quite frankly. Because when, you tell your business, can't nobody nobody got nothing to hold nothing against you, right? But in this book, she explains that the maintenance of healthy and secure relationships is amongst the most important values within African culture. And so I really want us to think about how the relationship between mother and child is formed even from in utero, even from the thought process of whether or not you're going to have a child and being intentional. And this is something that I've talked about having children. I think that it's time for us to go back to the process of being more intentional, of intuiting our children and bringing them into existence intentionally. That's my personal thought. We need tribe. We are connection-oriented folks. Exactly. And this is part of what the book discusses. And I love that she points that out, and because she sets the stage of the understanding that, that's part of what was destroyed in our collective enslavement, not just in the U.S., but, in the Caribbean, where that was not, but probably, I don't want to say that. It might be a little bit less in the Caribbean, but probably not. I'm from Jamaica, so I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, so she goes on to discuss something that her husband said, and this is just so profound, and I absolutely loved it. And she said she asked her husband to define what the newborn grandson that they had, what his worth was. And the husband paused, and he responded. He said, he represents the potential and hope of the family. And he represents the continuation of our family lineage and legacy. He represents the future generation. And so his value is already clear from his birth, from his inception, his conception, and his birth. And from that, we now teach the values that he needs to grow into a stable member of our community. And that to me is just absolutely profound, because when you think about our lives at present, a lot of us are trying to unravel and understand what our worth is. And I think that when we see our worth in that way, that we are becoming productive members of our communities to perpetuate our communities, that shifts our perception and our perspective of ourselves and our purpose and our power in having and rearing children in a way that is going to shift the future, shift and shape the future. And that's just very profound for me. I think if you don't have the book, or if you read it before or whatever, go back over it, page 124. Children are valuable at birth. So you are valuable. You were valuable at birth, and you continue to add value as a mother, as a woman in your community. As I said, did a podcast episode today called Empower Mama, Mother as Leader, where we talk about this in depth. And you can find my podcast on my website, mommyevolve.com. And I speak to a shamanic, because I do all the holistic. Personally, I don't think that you can just talk your way out of anything or just do XYZ out of anything. I feel that we need to be holistic in our approach to healing. Because there's some stuff that goes down generations that is stuck in us, and then living in this society that is very harsh. We have to go back to some ancestral and traditional ways to give ourselves the ability to really function at our optimal. Anyway, so that was something that I found absolutely profound. And I feel like, even when we consider the time of postpartum. As you know, I'm a postpartum doula, and I'm very adamant about ensuring that women are cared for after time. When you understand the profoundness of childbearing, pregnancy, and birth, basically a woman that just delivered an entire soul, by the way, is open. And so in many indigenous cultures, you'll see ceremonies around closing her. And what does that even mean? And literally those words are used in the indigenous language, but that's what it oftentimes translates to, closing her. So you have to think about what you're closing her from, right? What are you closing her from? I have my ideas, given my experiences with postpartum depression and those kinds of things, because I was not nurtured the way that I needed to be nurtured after having a baby. I feel like there was a lot of things that were able to insert themselves into my auric field and my experience that would not have been able to insert itself into that if I would have been properly nurtured and known better. Not only that, but children are also closed and taken care of in certain ways, so that anything that they may have come through, their experience and their existence of childbearing and pregnancy and the birthing process, they are able to sort of, whenever I did another podcast with someone from West Africa, and it's not just in West Africa, anywhere in Africa, Central America, South America, they wash the children in herbs. There's very specific ceremonies around children. And that's to, again, keep their energies secure from certain spirits. And so if I were to relate this back to the post-traumatic slavery syndrome, think about the women having babies on plantations. And the woman is working up until giving birth, birthing this baby and going back to work with the baby strapped on her back. Or worse yet, if you don't know this, the quote-unquote father of gynecology and how he treated the women who may have had fissures in their vagina from giving birth, and how he treated their bodies. These are traumatic experiences, and a lot of women are still experiencing the vestiges of these traumatic experiences from centuries ago. So you wonder why there's families where there's women that keep on having babies young, or where, women are dying in childbirth, and there's an energy around. I can't wait to, on April 13th, I'm going to a Black maternal health conference with my sister from Melanated Moms. That's in New Jersey. So if you're in New Jersey, look up Melanated Moms and the work that she's doing, because it is phenomenal. And they're going to be talking about, because New Jersey has decided to put their money on the Black maternal health crisis and do their part. And so I'm very thankful for that. And she has her hand in that, because she's a healthcare practitioner. And so anyway, so just think about that connection. So when I'm talking about intergenerational healing, I'm talking about really going back into that level of understanding and energy, understanding your family history, thinking about why there are certain things that are being experienced in your family bloodline. It's not because there's not there's reason. Those energies that have been carried throughout generations are real. And unless we get a handle on it, we start to ask questions of our energy field, and we start to realize and understand that we don't have to live with those things, we're going to continue to pass them on. Start with one thing that you notice in your family. Start with one thing. Exactly. That would be one thing that's been generation forward. A great handle be had on it, as opposed to there still being a struggle with it 7 generations from now. Anyway, this book is a phenomenal book. It has a lot of great parenting tips in it, believe it or not, because it talks about how parents, react to children, how parents have to talk to their children about certain things young. It just gives a really great analysis that allows us to understand. It talks about the education system, and just having our children regain their self-value, their self-esteem, their self-worth. And I promise you it's something that you will also be able to regain yours as well. Okay. And so here's a sentence that I absolutely love. She says, and she's talking about esteem, self-esteem. Hey, sweet C. She's talking about self-esteem. And she says this, and this is something I've experienced in my own family. It says, in African American culture, there is no lack of pride. And for those of you just joining, I'm reading Dr. Joy DeGruy's Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. So hopefully you can rewatch it and catch it. So it says, in African American culture, there is no lack of pride in the accomplishments of our family members and friends. However, there is frequently a paucity of personal one-to-one acknowledgement of their deeds. I've often heard of parents praise members of their family. Praise members of their family once they have left the room, as if praising them in their presence would be improper. In the absence of voice recognition and praise from their elders, children often feel like their parents are not proud of them and carry a lifetime of self-doubt as to their worth. Healthy esteem comes from healthy, positive exchanges with the people in our lives on whom we depend for support and guidance. So how often do you praise the children in your family or anybody in your family instead of giving criticism? Or telling them that you expected them to do better when they did great? Or asking them to refine their understanding of something if they didn't do well, to see where the gaps are so you can help them. Do you hear the difference? There's a difference in the level of accountability and responsibility in the reactions that you have. So you have to be very, very cautious of whether or not you're receiving that, right? So you have to give that to yourself and be around people who are going to give that to you. And then be very intentional about giving that not only to the children in your family, but to the adults. Like, listen, you're doing a great job. Don't be so hard on yourself. What business you working on? How can I help you? That's a great idea. Continue to work and strive for that. Okay. All of those things are very, very critical because we tend to be very judgmental and critical towards one another. And I'm not speaking to I've been through that process of having to heal myself from being judgmental and critical of everything and everyone. It's such a blockage. It is an energetic blockage to be that way. It is an energetic blockage to be that way. She talks about stress and how that affects your mental health, which is something y'all know I talk about that all the time. Yeah. She gives tools on how to mitigate your anger in the face of, trying to relate to family or friends, because we know anger is a huge thing. I know for me, this year has been a year of really focusing on my anger and getting deeper into my self-care in a way that allows me to release that anger, because it's layers to this. It's layers and levels to this. And you're talking to somebody who's been working on her self-care for 11 years. My daughter's 11. And I'm still unpacking. So the sooner you start, the better. Because the more you will be able to unravel to be able to teach your children and your grandchildren, or just the children in your community and around you, right? Because as I say, and I always say, you're a mother to something and someone, even if you've never bared and bore any children. As a woman, that is just part of who you are. It just is. It's one of the many parts of who you are, but it's part of who you are. All right. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I do hope that you utilize some of these tools and tips and understandings and really think about them. Really consider them. Consider how you can integrate some of this knowledge into your interaction with people. And how you can further love on your own self to release some things and to build something new. And I want to invite you to, again, check out my podcast, which you can find on my website, www.mommyevolve.com, or you can find it on anchor.fm. The name of the podcast is Mommy Matters. You can also book services with me. I conduct Reiki for moving some of this energy, some of these heavy energies that we have around. Thank you for following her on here and on Facebook. She's really cool. I actually just got off the phone with her as we're planning on attending one another's events. And you can book services. So moving energy is a very powerful thing. There's a lot of energies that you may need to move out of your system, your auric field, in order to feel lightened and empowered. Reiki for me has been great. In fact, next week I'm going to do a whole conversation about Reiki because I think people have a limited understanding of what it is. So I'm going to talk about that next week. Anyway, on our mommy chat, just to talk about what it means, what it is, give you some tips and tools on how you can focus the energy for yourself and in your children, and do some healing work on yourself and in your children, because we all possess the ability to do it, right? Someone who is attuned to the energy and in community can, has certain tools that are going to be more effective. But anyone can do it. Intention is powerful. Intention is very powerful. Anyway, so if you want to book Reiki or any mentoring consultations, then please feel free to do that. I'm also open for interviews on podcasts and all of that wonderful stuff, vending, etc., etc. And I look forward to connecting and teaching people more about this concept of intergenerational healing, what it means, how we can shift some things specifically and really look within ourselves to see what it is that we need to shift and be intentional about it. Not be embarrassed that, this is something that I've done, because I'm very open and honest about some of the mistakes that I've made in parenting and things that I did when I didn't know any better. It's a part of the process. I'm glad that I know now, and I can be more intentional about how I focus my energy towards the people that I love, specifically children, honestly. I have a huge passion for the education and upliftment of our youth, because they are our future. You have to consider the fact that when you're old and, need somebody to come to your house to fix something, it's going to be them children. It's going to be those children, or if you're in a nursing home, or God forbid, nobody better not put me in no nursing home. These are the people you're going to have to face. So you need to consider that when you're thinking about children, when you're thinking about our environment, when you think about any of those things. I am certainly a legacy-minded and an earth-centered person, and unapologetically. So again, connect with me for any services, consultations. I also do past life readings and self-care readings as well. And my schedule for next week, I have a few slots open. So I hope to be able to talk to some of you. And thank you so much for listening. Please DM me if you have any suggestions for some, conversations that you want to have. Today, as I said, I reviewed this book because I just finished reading it. Have had it for years. Have had it for years and just read it. I'm not ashamed. Okay, I'm not ashamed. And when I'm done reading the next book that I'm reading, y'all are going to be able to see it. And y'all, I think you will be intrigued. That'll be in the next 2 weeks. I should be done. Anyway, my loves, enjoy your evening. Have a smashing weekend. I look forward to my weekend. You can, again, look at my services at bit.ly/mom appointments, or you can grab the book at bit.ly//mommy handbook. And I look forward to seeing y'all next week on the Mommy Chat. All right, y'all. Peace and love.